to order on Wednesday, February 9th. I'm going to announce that this meeting is held pursuant to the open meeting law that allows for virtual meetings. I will also announce that this meeting is being recorded for the general public. Members of the Finance Committee present, when I call your name, please say present. Sue Robbins.
Present.
Greg Marr.
Present.
Heather McHugh.
Present.
Andy Jefferson.
Present.
Angelina Correa.
Present.
And Mark Haddad is present. Peter, you don't have a quorum of the select board here yet, so we'll hold off on calling you to order until you get a, because you are posted for tonight, right?
Well, we're posted under your agenda.
Oh, okay. Do you want to call your, well, when you get a quorum, you can do that. I'll also note that Mr. Kusher just joined us as well. So that being said, just a couple of rules. This is a public hearing on the budget, so I'm going to ask for a motion to open the public hearing of the Finance Committee. We're going to turn the meeting over to our town administrator, who is going to present the budget as required by our bylaws and charter to the Finance Committee this evening. I would ask everyone, if you have a question, to please use the raise your hand function, because when Evans is sharing the screen, we won't be able to see everybody on the screen. So if you use the raise your hand function, you go right to the top and we'll be able to recognize you. Evan, my question to you tonight is, do you want interruptions as we go through it, or do you want us to wait until the very end to ask questions?
I would prefer no questions. Thank you. No, either way is fine. I would just audibly call out because I'm going to be staring probably at my PowerPoint. So
okay,
if anybody has anything, just holler out.
Okay. Sue Robbins?
Yes, I would just like to make a motion that we open the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor by roll call? Sue?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Heather?
Yep.
Andy?
Aye.
Angelina?
Yes.
Dan?
Aye.
Roger? Roger? Going once? Going twice? Mark, aye. Peter, I see you have a quorum of your committee if you want to call your meeting to order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, we have a quorum of the select board. All those in attendance, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Mead?
Mead's here.
Mr. Often?
I am here.
Ms. Roy?
Roy's here.
And Peter Carlson here. I believe that this would be our attendance here tonight. I do believe Doreen is not going to be able to make it tonight.
Excellent. Sue, you had your hand up? Sue,
Yes, Mr. Chair. Barry is present.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see him. Thank you. All right, I am now turning this over to our town administrator. Evan, the floor is yours, and we look forward to seeing this award-winning budget presentation.
Oh, thank you. Might not be award winning.
I'm sure it is going to be award-winning. At the end of the day, I'm going to give it an award.
I think I accidentally raised my hand too. Okay. Wrong button. Is everyone seeing my PowerPoint?
Yep.
Great. All right, we will jump right into it. All right, so before I begin, I want to just do some quick acknowledgements. I want to acknowledge the select board for their support and everything we've done over the past year to get to this point. The school committee, of course, the finance committee are been a great partner to work with over the past year. It's actually just shy of a year from when I started. Our department heads put in a lot of hard work into this budget and really stepped up when we needed them to, and really thankful to have all of their support. And I want to especially thank Mary Loria, our finance director, Superintendent Cummings, Director of Finance Anita Patel, William Blake, and Cindy Ide. They all put in a ton of work, and we were able to work really collaboratively together, which was great. So our overarching theme for this year financially has been to increase our fiscal transparency. It's a goal that I think we have. It's always a work in progress, but we've attained it, and or at least our short-term goals. And I want to show you a little bit of what we've been working on here. So you should all be seeing the budget book now. And so this has been really what we've been hunkered down on for the recent days. So rather than creating a budget document that's a PDF, everything is now in this electronic format. So this will actually hit our website tonight at 8 o'clock after the hearing concludes. or ish. And so it starts off with our transmittal letter. And this actually is the document that gives you the whole scope of the budget, really in a line item format, by category. I'm just going to touch briefly on this because then we're going to pop back over to a PowerPoint, and all of this data is available for you to look at and the public to look at their leisure. So everything is arranged in these tabs. This would be your tabs that you would normally see in a GFOA budget. We've built it on that platform, all the way down to our updated org chart. You will also see these org charts throughout the budget under each department. It breaks it out specifically. We have created. Was this the one I'm not done with yet? Of course, I clicked the one I'm not done with that one yet. Don't worry about that one. But we've got full demographics on the site now. Our basis of budgeting. I thought this was pretty neat. We were able to upload all of our financial policies that govern the town. They're all right here and clickable link. If you click that, you get our PDF. You then can move over to our budget message, which lays out our short-term factors, priorities, and issues, which I go over briefly in the PowerPoint. So that's why I'm kind of skipping through a little bit. We also have our select board goals and our personnel changes. Fund summaries. I'm going to get to some of the more interesting stuff here. So all of our revenue sources should pop up here. You'll have everything you'd want. You can drill down to through fees, licenses, departmental, federal, and state aid. We then have every department in the town has got its own page. And so let's say you wanted to look at what the town administrator's got going on. There's my mug. We have a brief description of what the department is about, expenditure summaries, expenditures by type. And then it goes into our line item budget with the comments that you would be looking for to talk about why a line item changed or remained the same or what that line item does. And that's everything that would fall under the town administrator's budget. You then have a broken down org chart. This will be consistent throughout the whole document on each individual department as you go. And you do want to make sure you're clicking this arrow to get the drop down. And that'll make that work. But we have it for public safety, police, fire, inspectors. It's very comprehensive. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And then this is my favorite part of the whole budget. I'm a capital planning guy. I spent a lot of time in this capital plan, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. So when you look at our capital plan now, it's broken out by department, and actually, if you hover over, it tells you how that allocation is broken apart. It also gives you the allocation of the funding source, which we were able to capture as well. Then if you scroll down, these are all of the individual projects that are in the capital plan. And if you click on the individual project, it'll bring up what the project is all about. Most of them also have photos for you to go through and see the scope of the project and what we're doing. This one actually has an Excel sheet attached to it as well that shows you every estimate throughout the project. And then it shows you the capital costs, the funding sources, and the location of that capital item. So the entire capital plan has that attached to it. Some are a little bit more robust than others, but we are still building that out as we go. Are there any questions on the budget book? Like I said, we'll go down into more detail as we go.
And I just want to say, Evan, I think this is phenomenal. It is so easy to follow. There's so much information there. It's just a great presentation. And Mary, I may have to change my mind. After seeing this stuff. Very good. Thank you, Evan.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to just do one other bounce over to ClearGov here quickly. This, is our website, and you can click on the Financial Transparency Center. And so what I wanted to point out is now when you come to expenditures or revenues, let's just take it a minute. You will see hold on. It's not popping up for me right now. I think it's still thinking, but fiscal 23 is available here. It will give you all that same information as a preliminary budget as you see in the budget book. I might have to click a different button and I will correct that by the end of the presentation here. But it's all here, all your demographics. We've worked on our projects page a little bit, and this shows you ongoing projects. Obviously, this was demolition of 60 Depot Street, and a little map. It's a simple project, so there's not a ton, but it shows you what we actually spent versus what was appropriated. And it shows you where you are in the project phase, which is cool. One thing that I did like about this particular section is I applied for a $50,000 grant through CPC. And what I was able to do, rather than create a whole document for them, is to create a project page that CPC can actually come over and see what we're requesting. They can see all the photos of it, the scope of work, everything else is all right here for them to look at. So that was pretty neat. And I think that is all I have for jumping around. If no one has any questions on that, I'll jump back into the PowerPoint.
I was just able to see 2023 on that site. So,
Okay. I think mine's just, I've been in ClearGov all day and it seems to be mad about all the data I've been inputting all day. So it's slow on my end. All right. So I had three priorities when I was looking at this budget. The first was to maintain the override capacity. And I have that 3 times on here because we talk about it all the time. It really is a singular conversation that comes up at every budget conversation that we have. So we had that in the forefront of our mind throughout the entire process. We also wanted to continue to ensure that we're funding the Grafton Public Schools competitively. That's obviously something that the town of Grafton takes great pride in, and we wanted to maintain that tradition. As I've mentioned at our last budget meetings, my goal is to add officers to the police department. We were able to do that throughout fiscal 22 by shifting around some funds. And we're looking to add 1 more in fiscal 23, which would bring us up to 23 officers. A little bit of background demographics, and I won't spend a ton of time here because all of this is available on ClearGov. But you can see that our split for residential and commercials continues to be 90, 10-ish, depending on how you do your rounding. Our average house value is up now to $448,000, and the average tax bill is about $7,500. Our population per last census is 19,664. So a little bit of comparison for Grafton with the state. Our median income is $106,000, which is 31% higher than the state average. However, our single family house value is slightly lower by about $50,000, and our average tax bill is roughly $1,000 more than the state average on the whole. So a little quick overview here. The official statement for Grafton as far as bonding, we are AA plus stable. We were able to resecure that in the beginning of 2021. Our OPEB liability is about $83.4 million. We have funded $313,000 for a total of 0.2% of funding. So obviously an area that we need to do a little more with. I will mention that we do have a placeholder in this budget to fund, I believe it's $50,000. That is a paltry sum compared to what we need, obviously, but the idea is to get that in the operating budget and build that over time till we get to a number that we're comfortable with and make some progress on this funding. Our stabilization is at basically 4.1 million. Free cash prior to any requests through our capital plan is at 2 million. And our current reserves are at 8.61 if you combine the two, which puts us right in line with where we want to be per our financial policies. So we're doing well there. Economic development for for 2022. We continue to see growth, most of which is residential. That is the lion's share of what we continue to see and continue to pick up. So on to our tax levy. We see a levy increase from 44 million to about 46 million. Our 2.5 increase this year was 1,160,000. We are targeting new growth at 700,000. And we have an excess levy capacity of 1.1 million for a total of 48,292,000.
Evan, can you spend a second on that? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Can you spend a second on the excess levy capacity and talk about where that is with the plan of the override to last X amount of years?
Yes, sir. So my next slide gets into that a little bit more.
Oh, look at that. I'm sorry.
Override. I got it. This is what we want to focus on. So I want to give a little caveat. So prior to about 10 a.m. this morning, this number was much better, which, life of a town administrator, right? So you can see that in fiscal 21, we used about 900,000 of that override, leaving us with a $2.2 million capacity. That gets whittled down in fiscal 22 to about 1.7. We used 600,000 in that year. Now, one caveat I want to point out with that 1.7 excess capacity is that that's not how it started when we finalized the budget in the spring. That's how it ended up after we had better than expected revenue numbers. So that actually gave us a little bit more. We had shot for about 1.5. So this year we wanted to set the bottom at $1 million in excess capacity as an absolute lowest place we want it to be. We're currently at 1.1 with roughly 750,000 used of the override capacity. This morning that was closer to 1.5 million. But I got a estimate from our friends at Blackstone Valley Tech, and their budget is increasing. Our share of that budget increases by roughly 320,000 this year, which ate into that budget excess capacity that I was feeling real good about yesterday and a little bit less good about today. So here's my thoughts on making it last 5 years or making it last out. I still think we're well on track to do that. We can hit that. I think that this number is going to be higher when we close out the year. I think we're probably going to be back up to 1.3 or 1.4 million.
That'll be what, once you get your new growth certified, that'll help.
Exactly. Yeah. That's where I think we're going to end up. If it remained unchanged, I don't think it's catastrophic. I think we're still on target. But I think if we wind up at that 1.4, which is where Jay, Mary, Anita, and I thought we were going to be before 10 a.m. this morning, we're now beyond what I think the expectation was. And so if we can keep ourselves to that, I think, instead of a 5-year look ahead, we're talking 6 to 7 years. And that's obviously our goal. I think Greg has a question.
Go ahead, Greg.
Do you have information on what kind of an increase that Blackstone is as a percentage of last year, or what was expected, or why the increase?
So I have really preliminary numbers. They don't even do their budget presentation until March 10th. And so I reached out to Dr. Fitzpatrick and just asked him to give me a little bit of advance notice so that I can plug something into the budget. I'm sure their budgets have always been transparent from what I see looking back through. I don't have any concern with that. We'll have all of that data. I just don't have it. He literally gave me 2 sentences of what to plug in that would be a safe number, with the caveat that school committee has not voted anything for Blackstone Valley.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And it does show in ClearGov what that percentage change is. And we can certainly pop over to that and look at that. New growth. This is historic new growth back to 2015. And this is our new growth that we've included in the budget. I think at 700,000, we are at a reasonable place. I would have been comfortable at 800,000, looking at what's on the horizon for Grafton in fiscal 23. But we're playing it. Well, Mary's playing it safe on me, and so we're gonna peg ourselves to 700,000, and we think that we will exceed that without an issue. Any questions on new growth? I know I had a couple of questions before. All right. Now we come to the operating budget. This is the revenue by category. So this is all of the revenues that you can expect to see. And I won't, like I said, go line by line by line. But we are expected to see an increase that is substantial in our Chapter 70, which really made this budget a little bit easier for us to complete. And we are seeing growth in some other areas, like our what we're projecting for fees, and obviously our tax change. So total revenues for fiscal 22 was about fiscal 22 was about 70,500,000. This year we're projecting 72,500,000, which is
Peter, sorry to interrupt you, Evan. Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Evan, can you elaborate on a couple of numbers here that kind of stand out to me? Is the fees from FY22 adopted to FY23? When I see a 57% increase, can you just elaborate a bit on that one, and also departmental revenue?
Yep. So, and I'll probably call out Mary too, but our conversations were basically around these numbers have been historically not entered into the budget, even though our historic fee collection is higher. And so we're simply adjusting our projections to match closer to with what the town is consistently doing.
Evan, I think you have a mistake on the fines and forfeits. You have it at plus 7%. That looks like it should be a negative 7%.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, and I'm clicking it to change it, but I can't. So I'll fix it after. Thank you, Mark. Mary, is that an accurate way to describe what we're doing there?
Where do you have the marijuana revenue in here?
Hold on, Mary, you're
Sorry, I was
That's
looking
okay.
to unmute. So yeah, I have a master spreadsheet that I have like detail, like I have hundreds and hundreds of accounts that make up these totals. So I will let you know that we did estimate for the marijuana, I think 100,000 for that. And then I did increase on the departmental for the trash bags by 20%. So so I increased that.
right. So
I can send you all the detail line items that how I got up.
Sometimes we find that interesting. So I would like to see that. And I'm also very happy to see you accounting for every revenue that you're calling out in the budget, because that's something that hasn't happened in the past. And it's good to see that you're accounting for it. So thank you for doing that, Evan. Peter, did I see your hand up?
You did, Mr. Chairman. I would just say I don't really need to see the detail. I just wanted to know, how did we arrive at that number? And what you described to me makes sense. And I would agree with the chair, Mr. Haddad, in stating that I like the idea of disclosing, all of the fees that we collect into a single line item. So I know we did this last year, and we're just capturing more accurately what's going on for FY23. So I'm all set with the detail, but thank you for the explanation.
great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for reminding me too, Mary, that departmental revenue is where the trash bag shows up, because that is something that we tackled this year. Just one minor correction. We did include 120,000 of marijuana revenue. And that is because that is the minimum that's called out in year one of the HCA. And we did that because we don't have a track record. We think it's going to be higher. We hope it's going to be higher. I'm not comfortable projecting, taking a guess at that. So
That's wise. It's good to be conservative when you don't have exact numbers.
Yep. So that's where are we good to move to the next slide?
Yes.
Or do we have another question? Good.
Yep.
Great. So we've looked at our total revenue at 72,571,553, and now we'll jump over to start to look at some expenses at 71,396,997. Help if I hit the right button. Okay, operational budget. I want to caveat one thing because this has been something that's historically plagued me. So some of these numbers show up as percentage changes that are a little bit outsized to their impact on the actual budget, right? So if you've got $1,000 and you add $500 to it, that's 50% increase, but really not substantive to the budget. So we will drill down on all of these things as we go. So we are looking at a total increase of growth for the budget of about 4.46%. You can see that our public safety incorporates about 10.6% of that. That is primarily driven by three things. That's going to be, we are now accounting for the entire salary of the fire chief. We only had to capture half of that last year, if you remember, because we were in that hiring process. It accounts for 23 officers, as I had mentioned before, and it accounts for a part-time plan reviewer for the building department, which I'm hoping solves one of the issues that I have heard about since coming here, which is people's dissatisfaction with the length of time it takes you to get a permit. That was something that's been kind of an ongoing theme. I've heard about that from a couple of select board members, and it's something that we wanted to address. Public schools has an increase of 5.42%. Remember that they are also the recipients of a higher Chapter 70 number by about 1.2 million. So even though that shows here, there's a revenue offset to that. So I just want to give that caveat. And so if there's no questions on this, I don't break down by number. I stay at about 35,000 foot, but I talk about what changes in this budget in the following slides. So do we have any questions here? Or would you like me to jump into the next set?
I'm good going ahead. Any questions from anybody?
I'm assuming
Go
you're
ahead.
going to cover the capital, the 40% decrease in capital.
So it's how the budget works. It looks a little funky. It's simply because not all the capital once the capital gets approved, accounts get made and then it gets captured there. So it's just not there. I tried to do this without showing it, but the numbers wound up being super disingenuous and they don't add up, and I just couldn't do it. So that's all that is. It just looks weird. All right. So changes to expenses. So this budget, we had some changes to our fixed costs. We have an increase in our retirement contribution by 9.84%, which is roughly $231,000.
Kevin, can I stop you right there?
Yes.
You're adding police officers as your goal.
Yes.
2 years from now, you're going to start getting hit with a major increase in the retirement contribution because of the Group 4 employees.
Yes.
Are you planning for that in your future projections?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So we do have, and we can go when we get to those budget hearings, we can certainly go deeper into that if you want.
I definitely
Okay.
want to, because I got surprised one year when I added some firefighters and it bit me, and I don't want that to happen to you.
Yep. Same. Had that happen as well. And I appreciate that comment. So our town insurance cost is 0%. I included that here because it actually went up 2.3%, but we have a 2.5% prepayment bonus. So it comes out to a wash. So we actually don't incur any increase. Right now, we're carrying an 8% increase in health insurance. That's what we've been told to expect as a worst case scenario. So that's what we're carrying, which is an increase of $404,000. It's our hope that number comes in, at 6 or 7. But we are planning for worst case. We did incorporate that into the budget. The budget universally has a COLA of 2%, with the exception of the Grafton Police Department that does not have a settled contract. So these are kind of, again, I like to do this on a kind of high level. So our select board the change. Oh, sorry, Dan. Yep, you have a question?
Yeah, just really quick about the 2% COLA increase across the board. I noticed looking through it that for some of the new some of the positions where we hired new people, where people left, we replaced them. There's considerably more than 2% of an increase from the predecessor, and I'm a little concerned about the message that sends to current employees that if you stay here, you get 2%. If you leave, we'll pay a lot more than that to replace you.
Yep.
And I'm worried that might incentivize people to maybe look around.
So I have that concern as well. The reality of it is that that's kind of how it works. If I had stayed in my other community, I would have got a 2% raise, but I can come to Grafton and make more money. The other thing that's driving some of that, quite frankly, is that the market right now to hire anybody in municipal government is horrendous. Finding financial people especially is extremely difficult. And so, we've positioned ourselves more competitively to bring on new people really because of that. Now we do have, and I'll get to that a little bit later in the presentation. We do have, our salary study. We're waiting on the final draft, but we have projections there that will correct some disparity, but we're not as far out as I might have thought given the data. So I think it's a valid concern. I don't know how to really correct that. Unfortunately, in 2022 in our hiring market, that's kind of how it's played out.
Right. I just feel like the hiring market is also the problem on the other side of it, that anybody who feels, like they're getting shortchanged can look around and easily get hired somewhere else.
Absolutely.
That's my concern, that if we're not incentivizing them to stay, then we're incentivizing them to leave.
Right.
Well, Levin, like you said, I agree with Dan. That's a big concern, and I'm seeing that too, in where I work. But I think the fact that you're doing a salary survey, you're trying to correct the market, and I think once those figures come in, I mean, I would be agreeable to look at making changes within the budget to address those shortfalls. I think it's important. And Dan's 100% right. We can't afford to lose employees.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
excellent point, Dan.
Yep.
Right. Because if somebody decides to leave, because we only gave them a 2% raise, we're going to give somebody else a bigger raise to come fill that spot.
Yep. Absolutely. Valid concerns. We've got the salary study. I don't have all the solution for it, but we'll talk about that a little later in the presentation. We'll also talk about it, throughout the budget hearings for FinCom for sure. Very valid. So general government, in the select board, we've created a full-time employee for the select board, FinCom, and Affordable Housing Trust. That shows up as a change in the select board budget, but there's also offsets for that elsewhere. I am proposing in my office to change the management analyst back to an assistant town administrator position. I've created a 3-year plan to do that. But I really think that would be a better position for me to have, and would give me more support and more hours in which to be supported. The assessor's office, we're looking to change, and this is a small change really budgetarily. We're going to get away from the office manager and put an assistant assessor in place. So Grafton didn't have an assistant assessor, which, when Mary Oliver vacated her position, did cause us quite a bit of agita that would have been otherwise not a problem if we had someone that could just step into the role more readily. And lastly, in this section, so MISGIS, this is something that we'll be changing the name of when we do our new chart of accounts. But this is where all of our technology costs are housed. So we have increased in this area to absorb some of the costs of the library. The library has a ton of technology in it. And, even though that technology is new, technology being what it is, we do have some pretty consistent need to service that technology. We also capture our switch over to Vadar in this area, and we also house ClearGov in that area. Yeah, Sue.
I just asked, I kind of wanted to know, when are we going online with Vadar, with our new software?
Mary, do you want to?
So we're right in the middle of it, and we have Vadar installed in all the finance team computers. They've uploaded the motor vehicle excise to Vadar, and so we're gonna do a freeze at the end of this month, and then we're gonna convert our real estate, motor vehicle, personal property, and so the treasurer collector they won't be able to do transactions for 2 weeks until that's all reconciled, and then the training will start for them to post in cash, and then in April we'll freeze for the utility, and in July we'll have the new chart of accounts. So I'm starting to work on old accounts, and I'm meeting with the department heads on restructuring their departments, and try to get their feedback on things, and just really dissect some of these stagnant grant accounts I have and clean up the books. But yeah, we're right on progress.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
Any other questions before I jump on the next slide? Okay. Click. Here we go. So continuing in general government, we do have an added position in human resources. It is shared with the schools. We have created a shared benefits coordinator. We're currently shopping around to see if we can find somebody in this market. That is something that both the schools and the town, I think, really need. So our one HR analyst doing payroll, there's no redundancy, and it's a lot. She, between everything else she has on her plate, she is out straight, and the school side is out straight. So if we can combine these into a shared position, I think that's going to be a home run. The town clerk has some expansions that she will discuss, obviously, when she comes before you, mostly around expanded election costs and early voting. So conservation and planning, if you recall, we had added 20,000 for an associate planner and 15,000 for a field inspector. My budget proposes that we eliminate both of those. Neither of those positions have been filled, and that we would spend the next 6 months or so restructuring what that department looks like. So the department has some interesting hierarchy in it that I think could be made more efficient, and also, I think there's some more efficient ways to spend our money there too. So that's my plan there. Any questions on that? Okay. Public safety, obviously, I've mentioned the increase to 23 officers. Fire department, full-time chief added to the budget in full. There's also some needs in communications, training, vehicle, and building maintenance that have been identified by Chief Canoyer, who will obviously go into further detail with you on some of that. The inspector of buildings, we added a part-time employee as a plan reviewer. That person will not be doing inspections. They're literally just taking plans from the homeowners or small businesses and getting them through the process to the inspection stage quicker.
Go ahead, Dan, and then I have a question.
Sure.
So I just want to ask about the police officers. It feels to me like this kind of just the conversation began at kind of a late stage. Like I hadn't heard about this until you had mentioned that you had already told the chief to hire another officer. So I think around like December. So I guess a couple concerns I have are, it feels like we are kind of going around town meeting a little bit, adding an operational expense like this and then go into town meeting to have it approved after it's already been added. And then I haven't seen anything, studies or I guess, like standard calculations for supporting why we need an increase in officers. So I think that would kind of help me to better understand why we need this.
So, Dan, if I can, Sue Robbins, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been on the FinCom for 4 or 5 years now, and every time Chief Crapo has come before us, he's talked about the FBI recommended levels of police officers for our population. And every year he comes in and he said to us, if there's ever any more money available, he'd like to see more police officers. And I kind of support the fact that Evan is trying to do that. As far as going around town meeting sets the budget. The select board determines the size of the departments. And if Evan got permission from the select board to fill that spot and it is in the budget, then Evan is all set doing that. So I understand your question, Dan, but I don't want anybody to think that Evan is circumventing the town meeting process, because he most certainly is not. But Sue, I'd like to hear from you, because you usually cover the police budget. Angeline and I are going to do it this year, but we've been Chief Crapo has been pretty adamant about that over the years, right?
Correct. Every year he's asked for additional officers, and he's handed out material as to why he needs it, and other towns and what they have, and how we're lacking. So it wasn't a surprise at all. He's done this every year and has asked for it every year.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you, Sue. Andy, and then Dan, and then Peter.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. I don't have, the formula in front of me or anything, but I do have from the budget notes last year that the chief said for a population of around 19,000, he'd like to be at 25 officers. So I do remember it coming up, but I was part of that discussion too at the same time. So
Thanks. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think I was there last year with the chief, but I think for the previous 2 years I was, and I recall him saying that ideally he would like more, but he was comfortable with the current level. And I don't recall ever hearing a request coming up in the budget process. So to say that he's asked for more, I guess it depends on what you mean by ask, but I don't recall this coming up as a budget request. And then it just feels like it's not something I've heard the select board discuss. It's not something that town meeting approved when we did an override that included public safety, but it was, the fire department. And so it feels to me like this is kind of a larger kind of decision to go in this direction that town meeting has not addressed. And we're already halfway there.
Well, obviously, we're going to sit down with the chief when he comes in to present his budget this year, and we'll get into the details. But I just want to be really, really careful to say that we're circumventing the town meeting process, because town meeting set a budget. And if Evan can fill a position with the board's approval within that operating budget, then he's complying with the appropriation. And I just want to be really clear about that point.
But the budget presentations that I've seen in the past show the number of people in each department, the number of employees. So I guess to kind of get more specific, when Evan, when you said that money is being freed up, what exactly do you mean by that? Is that what mechanism are you using to put that money toward police officers?
So it's either already in the police department budget in their appropriation for staffing, or it would have to be done as a transfer at town meeting. I don't have the special in front of me, so I don't remember exactly every dollar removed.
Evan, can we just get to I want to hear from Roger. Before I go to you, I want to hear from Peter and you. You went to the select board, asked for permission to hire an additional police officer, correct?
I did the appointment and the select board confirmed it.
Okay, so Dan, if the money within the budget is available and the select board approve it, then he's within his power as the town administrator to hire that additional police officer position. I really want to be clear on that point because, you know, priorities change. And I'll talk from my personal experience. I have a problem with dispatching in my town. I need additional dispatchers. So I went to the board. Part of my budget next year is asking for an additional dispatcher. I went to the board and asked to hire that position early because I have savings in another department, and the board gave me permission to do that. That happens all the time. If a need comes up and the town administrator identifies it and the select board support it, as long as it's within the operating budget, he can do it. Now, he does run the risk, and you raise a very, very good point. He runs the risk that we may not have the funding available the next year to continue that position. So that is a risk, but he's within his authority to do that. Roger, you had a question, and then Peter?
Well, can I?
Yep, please go ahead, Dan. I'm
So
sorry.
the thing about the select board confirming the appointment, I don't recall anything being mentioned there about that being an additional officer. I guess when I saw that, I assumed that there was, you know, replacement. I guess growing the staff, increasing the number of staff, it seems to me like something that needs a conversation. And this longer term goal is something that I think needs more of a conversation and more of a like a presentation, you know, explaining what. Like I'm not saying I think we don't need more police officers. I'm saying I don't know, and I haven't heard anybody give an explanation for it in a public meeting. So I'm confused how anybody else is completely comfortable accepting this long-term plan, unless you all have, you know, some deeper knowledge about the police department staffing needs than I do.
I think that, to me, the size of the department is within the purview of the chief executive body of this town, which is the select board through the town administrator. So if the finance committee, maybe we should have been involved in that decision because it's a budgetary decision that's going to impact next year. But once that budget gets approved, the town administrator with the select board has the ability to manage that budget. I think that's what Evan did. So Roger, I'm going to skip you for 1 second because I think on Dan's point, I want to hear from Peter on the select board's position on this. So Peter, if you don't mind addressing that, I'd really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'm not speaking on behalf of the board here. I just wanted to point out, well, I don't disagree with Mr. Kusher's request for additional information supporting staffing increases. I think that's important. We do that at the school level, but I do want to make it very clear that it is the town administrator's powers and duties. It's outlined very clearly in the town charter under section 4.2, under section C, where be entrusted with town personnel. And would be responsible for keeping current a plan established for requirements for staffing requirements for town departments, with the exception of the school department, which under Mass General Law dictates that. I just wanted to comment a couple things that we've had some retirements in the police this year. I think we've had Mr. Brassard. We've had a couple, if not one, I know of that retired. A very senior police officer has been with us over 30 years. And we were obviously replacing those vacancies this year. In addition to that, like I do agree with Mr. Kusher that there should be in part of this budget proposal, when we're talking about long-term staffing projections and an increase even in the existing department, even though it's under the powers and duties of the TA, I would agree. I think it's prudent that we get that more information, but I know this is the first throw at the budget presentation, and I would hope that when you all are looking at the other components in the budget, that information comes to surface and it satisfies people's questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Roger?
Did I get it this time?
You got it, Roger.
All right. First and foremost, I think this is hardly the time to pontificate about different parts of the presentation. Tonight's meeting is strictly to listen to Evan present his budget for this year. For us to start picking apart little bits and pieces of this is ridiculous. Let's just listen to what he is presenting to us. When the time comes to question him about different parts of this budget, we can do that, and the time and place for that is at the meetings. It's not for this. This
Roger,
is
I'm gonna-
getting a
Roger,
little
I'm gonna-
ridiculous.
Now, Roger, I'm gonna interrupt you. I have no problem whatsoever. If Dan has a specific question about a specific line item as part of the presentation, I think he has every right during a public hearing to ask a question. Evan is presenting a budget. He talked about an additional police officer, and Dan is totally within his right to bring up that question and ask and have it answered. Now, I know in the past, maybe that hasn't been the case, but I think Evan, do you have a problem with us asking you questions about specific items within the budget as you go through it?
I do think I said no questions at the beginning.
Oh, you did say that. That's right. I'm sorry.
No, I'm fine with it. I don't have an issue. Could I speak to the?
You can speak to anything you'd like at your
Thank you.
presentation.
I know. So, this came up, I believe Matt raised this issue at one of the more recent select board meetings, about the tail wagging the dog a little bit. So one of the things that I've thought about since then is that the need to, back up a little bit. Now, this is a budget presentation, so I'm presenting, what I believe should be in the budget. We will talk about all of the rationale and reasons for those things when we get to the department level. I think they're perfectly reasonable questions. Could there have been a better, more robust dialogue when we went from 20 to 22, had our retirements, had more money in there? Yes, absolutely. Does that mean that we circumnavigated town meeting? I don't believe that we have in any way. And so one of the things that the chief and I will put together for both the select board to review as well as for FinCom to review when we get to the police department part of the budget is the universal crime report and the minimum staffing requirements set therein. For a town the size of Grafton, I'm doing this top of mind because I wasn't expecting to go this deep. I believe they recommend about 2.4 officers per 20,000 people, which is 48 officers. We have 22. I would never try to get us to 2.4, but I do think that 1 per 1,000 is ridiculously thin line to hold. And we see that when you start having problems like COVID, staff injury, anything else, there's no fallback. And then you wind up pulling specialties out of community policing that we don't want to do. We want to have those people doing community policing that we've hired them to do. So absolutely, can we do a more robust job of talking that through? Yes. Should we? Yes. I'm committed to doing that. And I think that when you see those numbers, you will agree with what the chief and I are trying to achieve.
Thank you, Evan. Roger, did you have a follow-up question?
I just did, considering that we had approximately 17 sworn officers in the middle of the 1970s, to debate this any further is kind of ridiculous,
Fair point.
especially in a presentation mode. We can talk about it on Saturdays.
Understood. Thank you, Roger. Greg?
So just one thing that I think I just heard there is that we can, due to retirement of officers and hiring of more junior officers, we can increase the personnel count without a significant increase in personnel cost. Is that kind of where some of that savings is coming from?
Correct.
Thanks.
Dan?
So I guess just the last thing I want to say is I think that the big reason why I want this to be a more public and open and detailed conversation is the elephant in the room here. This national partisan hyper-polarized controversy around police funding. And I think it doesn't, the things that are big in the news don't really apply to Grafton, but there are going to be people who see it in that lens. And if we do it in this sort of quieter way where we're kind of halfway there once we talk about increasing by 5 officers. I think there's going to be pushback that doesn't need to happen. And I think if we have all of that information and data that we can go through and point to when lots of people do become aware of this, it'll be much easier to have that discussion.
Yep, fair point. Evan, before you go to the next slide, I have a question on the plan reviewer.
Yes, sir.
Is the building department that busy that we need somebody to come in and look at plans? The building commissioner doesn't have enough time to do that as part of a permit application?
I believe we do. And when we get to that section of them presenting, we'll have the number of permits and the revenues and all that stuff for you. Right. as transparent as possible.
Understood. Then I'm going to want to see that new growth number go up to about 900,000 because they're so busy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, all day.
Thanks, Evan. Sorry for all the interruptions. And
nope, not at all.
We'll get back to your presentation.
That's what I'm here for. I've heard all of the feedback, and we'll make that a more robust conversation. I think it's all good. All right, so still in Inspector of Buildings, we're talking about there's a one-time fee to migrate some data over from the ZBA into our Viewpoint software. When we are in that section of the budget, one of the reasons I called it out in here, it's only like a $5,000 line, but it is a great example of a one-time expense in the operational budget in ClearGov. When you look at it, you will see a little red flag next to it, and that tells you that that is a one-time expense that disappears at the end of this budget cycle when we close that out. Schools, I'm not going to touch. That's obviously the purview of the superintendent, and I think you'll all be happy with what Dr. Cummings has been working on. All right, Public Works, Highway, you'll see an increase when you get there. We have a new, larger building. Energy costs are up. And we also increased the funding a little bit for tree work. So tree work is an ongoing conversation. I know in looking back through other presentations and notes, I've seen that you all have heard of this before. I'm very familiar with it as well, especially given the gypsy moth problems. And so we're still working through a backlog of, dead or diseased trees along the sides of the roads of Grafton. Health and Human Services, you will see an increase. There's a part-time employee that we've been housing in there as well, trying to get our hands around some of that work. It is ARPA eligible, and I do anticipate having that conversation with the ARPA committee. So there is really minimal impact to the operational budget, but you'll see it there. Culture and Recreation, Library, there are some requested increases to staffing. I know that there have been ongoing conversations about how the library was presented and the number of staff that are required. And so I think that this is a conservative approach to looking at the size of the facility, the number of hours that are needed to be open to the public, and the ability to do that with current staff. While I wasn't privy to those initial conversations, I am cognizant of that and I think sensitive to that. So I'm sure we will have lots of dialogue around that when we get to it. And we can certainly pull that apart as we go. Any questions on this slide? Okay. So here are some, I want to talk about some of the cost saving things we're doing and some of our revenue initiatives. So grants in fiscal 21, the town of Grafton received $823,494 in grants. We were very aggressive with that. I will say that I am extremely happy and proud of your department heads. They are all very good at chasing money and seem to take personal glee in getting that money. I get emails all the time of micro grants for $450 that people are ecstatic to have received. And, it seems really paltry, but when you add all of that up, we're we're at $800,000+ in the last year alone. And I think that's some really solid work. One-time revenues. So we are going to be going in front of ARPA, the ARPA committee, with a couple of requests. Some of the things that would have been carried in this budget that we are going to try to see if the ARPA committee will agree with us on, and then subsequently the select board after that, is the replacement of HVAC at Grafton Middle School. That's a $2.5 million project. I have talked about that with the ARPA committee. We haven't had any deliberation, but I did push that out there. That is something that needs to be done that we would otherwise have to be carrying in this budget and bond for. The other thing that we are going to request, I'm sorry, before I move on, I do want to point out that we did receive state ARPA monies in the amount of, I believe, $150,000, and community compact grant towards that project at $188,000. So we're going to leave our ARPA request at $2.5 million, but I'm hopeful that it'll still come in under that when we apply our grant monies towards it. I'm just concerned about supply chain and cost changing, and I think we need to have a buffer. Lastly, we're going to be requesting through ARPA school department nursing funding, and so this is something that came apart about between meetings. So the ARPA committee and those who are on it, or those who are keying into this later, they have not heard this conversation, and this is going to be a request. So this is not a foregone conclusion by any means. But we can offset our nursing costs. We have increased nursing in the schools due to COVID and other considerations that add about $300,000 to the budget. So we do believe that this is an eligible expense that we could pull out and fund with ARPA for at least the next 2 fiscal years, at which time, hopefully we're in a different state, not physically, but mentally and virus-wise. Okay. I want people to think I'm trying to get Grafton into Connecticut or something. All right. So here's some variables to consider. Health insurance is a worst case number. We're hoping to see that lower. That pads our levy capacity that we're trying to maintain vigorously. We feel that our new growth hire will be higher than, it will be higher than what we've estimated. We do use ARPA funds into this budget number, which are obviously subject to ARPA committee recommendation and select board approval. So those are not foregone conclusions, and that needs to be called out. Chapter 70 increase is a major driver for school department growth. I only put that in here because we are operating on the numbers we were given. I don't think those numbers are going to change, at least not to the negative. Other people in our circle have that concern. So I do want to mention that we're basing this on our new Chapter 70 number as well. Grafton Police Department union contract is still open. Salary and classification is in the budget. We did.
Kevin, can I interrupt?
Yep, sorry.
On the police union contract, is the current agreement already expired or due to expire?
Yeah, already expired.
So there will be retroactivity involved with this potentially?
Yes.
Okay.
But I will say that I think that Mary and I have adequately planned for that.
Okay.
Was that a fair assessment, Mary? Or thing for you to say? I don't speak for you. Yes. Okay. I think we'll be okay.
Thank you, Evan.
And we do have a placeholder in here to be able to talk about the salary study implementation, who, what, when, where, how much, as well as some of the other contracting. So we did put aside some salary, what do you call it? Contingency to be able to deal with that conversation. So depending on how that conversation goes, that obviously changes that final number, but not by it. I'm not anticipating that by a ton. And then also our increased fees in the municipal solid waste program. So we have what we're estimating, which is a 17-20% increase. It could be more than that. It could be just on the lower side of that. So I just want to make sure that we're paying attention to that. That is kind of the budget again from that 35,000-foot overview. Does anybody have any other questions or comments before I jump into going over capital with you folks?
Any questions? Nope. Go ahead, Evan.
Okay. Thank you. So our capital plan this year, I'm recommending that we fund 1.47 million worth of projects. I would just like to acknowledge that I am going in front of CIPC tomorrow at 6 p.m. You're all welcome to come and hang out. It's gonna be a great time. And we're going to drill down a little bit further. This is a little bit of a different year and a different process than I had originally hoped for or envisioned. I would really like to have a much more robust conversation with the folks on CIPC. Us onboarding ClearGov, new capital software, and just the way things rolled out. It hasn't been as broad of a conversation as I would like. But it's definitely, in my opinion, more than, a rubber stamp. This is not set in stone, and we're going to be having much deeper conversations coming up. Greg?
So does this include the pre-existing lease payments?
It sure does.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So if we were on ClearGov right now, all of this is hoverable and you can break it all apart. But let me jump to another snapshot here. So this is our funding sources for that 1.474 or 1.75 million. So you can see we're pulling about 1.2 out of capital stabilization. We're using 229 out of free cash. That's a lot of your lease payments right there. I tried to just segregate them a little bit so that it was easier to follow. And 50,000 is the South Grafton Community House painting that I applied for a green communities, community preservation grant with. And here is the list. Yes, sir.
Do you have how much is in capital stabilization right now?
Yes. So that is hold on, let me sorry. Should be in here. Oh no, I don't have capital stabilization in this presentation. That's an oversight on my part. Mary, can you just pull that up out of the spreadsheet for me? It's 2 million and change.
That's close enough. Thanks.
Sorry about that. That's a good catch though. I should have had that. I thought I had that in my section. Mark, do you care if I call on people?
No, do
Okay.
whatever you want to do. This is your presentation.
Okay, Matt.
Oh, except for Matt.
Oh, stop it, Mark. Thanks. No, just quickly, I understand we're in flux right now. Historically, Grafton had put about $1 million towards capital funds, for dealing with capital maintenance in town. We, as a town, approved an additional $800,000. We're now this year at about 1.5, which is fine. I think it's important for us to try to not just go back to the 1 million or less than that. The idea behind the override was to add an additional 800,000 towards capital stabilization. So if we can get back to as much as possible, that $1 million plus the $800,000.
Are you saying you want me to spend 1.8?
Yes.
All right, done. It'd be through tomorrow. No, I'm kidding.
No, I get it.
I know.
Look, Evan. So we had this $1 million thing that went on for a long time.
Yep.
We've added an additional $800,000 via an override.
Yep.
And I think the expectation of the voters was we were going to add an additional $800,000 to capital maintenance. Finance Committee has very eloquently articulated the fact that we have an underfunded capital program. So there's a couple of things to that. One is we need to be funding as much capital as possible, particularly because we have a lot of new growth money, and that new growth money should be put towards capital maintenance that will, like long term, reduce our operating expenses. And we need to be honoring what people voted for.
Okay. So I developed this based on two factors. One is need, in my opinion. Two is what we will have on tap for the next fiscal year's capital requests, and what's in the plan that I want to make sure we have enough money to cover. Did I say two things? And three, I was looking to grow. You did about 1.2 million last year, 1.25.
Yep.
And so I was looking to, advance our capital plan without, mushrooming. Is what my intent with this is.
Totally understand that. What I don't want to happen is for us to have approved as a town $800,000 in additional capital spending, and for that to supplant the operational budget. And so I think you understand where I'm going with this.
I do. Yep.
And so I just want to make sure that, and this is why I've been really fighting for an additional 2.5% each year for the stabilization account, because we have to keep up with all the roads we're building, the additional buildings that we're producing, all of that additional. We have to have a sustainable budget.
Yep.
And so each year we have to put together something that's going to represent something that's going to be sustainable over time. So
I'm on the same page as you are, Matt. I hear you. We're getting there. I think that when you look at what we're funding, it's a mix of some new requests, some consistent requests, and we're also thinking about what fiscal 25 looks like, and making sure that we're going to have capacity in there to be able to handle some of the other stuff. And I think some of that's going to change with the new fire chief, to be honest with you. My conversations with Chief Canoyer already reconfigure like fire truck replacement schedules. And I think a lot of that is based on opinion and usage. So I just want to make sure that we have capacity to deal with some of that in the coming years. And I think we will.
Totally get that. And it doesn't have to be like even spend every single year.
Right.
The best approach is to look at the long term, and that's the type of capital planning that I've been fighting for years.
Yep.
And it's really important. So it's reserving a little bit of additional capacity for future years I'm completely on board with that, as long as there's a plan.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thanks,
All right.
Matt.
Colleen, did you have your hand up, or do you want me to move on?
I was just going to add on to the long-term planning of capital, how we wanted to maybe get away from leasing so much capital in the future. So reserving a little bit for the long-term plan is important.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Seeing no other questions, I'm going to jump into the plan itself. And again, CIPC has not seen my updated proposal here. I changed a few things around based on meetings with department heads. So I'm going to, again, kind of zip through this. We will be really digging into this in the future, say 30 days, 60 days. So you'll see in this capital plan that there are 3 separate purchases or requests for $24,000. Those requests would replace departmental vehicles. So they're threefold. One is the engineering vehicle, one is the assessor's vehicle, and one is the park and rec vehicle. So I have had the opportunity to be in 2 out of 3 of those. I would not want to be driving those around on a daily basis. And so what Grafton has done is taken used cruisers and put them into service as other vehicles. That's common throughout municipal government. I don't want to make that sound like that's not a common practice. The problem we run into is that, those vehicles come off the line with maybe a $3,000 value, trade-in value. But they've got 100,000 miles on them, and they've idled for, thousands of hours. So we wind up being faced with vehicles like, our park and rec vehicle needs about $5,000 worth of work. It's probably worth $2,000. The math isn't there for that. So what I looked at is replacing those three vehicles with hybrid vehicles. They get about 40 miles to the gallon, which is double what we're getting now. They have a life expectancy of about 10 years, which gives us, give or take, say $2,400 a year in operating expense plus maintenance. Now you're at maybe say 26. I still think we're in better shape doing it this way than we are taking old cruisers and chasing problems nonstop. And so that's my proposal here. These three vehicles are actually, they're called you can see them in the capital plan if you'd like. They're Ford Mavericks. They're 4-door little tiny pickup trucks with a little bed. They have hybrid motors in them, and they get, like I said, about 40 miles to the gallon. So nothing extravagant, but I think in my mind, a better proposition for our staff and for the town financially, honestly. You'll see we've got engine lease and pumper lease in here. I've included $100,000 request for renovating Station 2. Station 2, you can go and look at the pictures in our capital plan, is in need of some love. It has envelope problems. There's water infiltration. It's in pretty rough shape. It's about a $200,000 project, and I'm looking to split that over 2 years. We have two trucks. One is a dump truck. One is a pickup truck. This is a new request that I put in, but I do have some interesting news about this. So this is a machine that would be shared between cemetery, highway, and the maintenance department. So it is a snow removal machine that also does some other stuff. We did just receive or just applied for a grant for a snow removal machine grant at $50,000. So should we be recipients of that, we would only be paying $15,000 out of this. And I think we're in a competitive spot to do that. Either way, if you look at the common area in the center of town, that's where this machine would pretty much live for snow removal, as well as our new library. It is designed to be light and useful on bricks and agile in hard to get into places. So that's what we're looking to do there. The library needs another self-checkout gate near the youth entrance and patio. The patio was an additional add-on at some point, and in that process, again, I can't really speak eloquently to it because I wasn't part of that process, but the youths are able to go out that side door onto the reading patio, but there's no way to utilize the RFID scanners that are elsewhere in the building. $50,000 for the planning, the master plan. This is phase 2 of the 3-part process that we had talked about last year. PD replacing some exterior cameras. The rest of these there's a big swath here of public schools. I will leave that to Jay and Anita to speak more specifically on those things. I do think that they're very happy with the amount of funding that we are doing in this capital plan towards the schools. And I'm hopeful that they will voice their opinion, pro or con, of how they liked that when they meet with all of you. And then again, we're carrying that $50,000 here, but it's really a request for CPC dollars to paint the South Grafton Community House. And that is all she wrote.
Are there any last questions for Evan on the budget presentation? Go ahead, Dan.
I just want to really quickly just clarify from earlier. When I said going around town meeting, I did not mean to imply anything like Evan going beyond his authority or anything like that. I just wanted to clarify that because it sounded like that's how you took it, Mark. So
it is. That's why I was concerned, Dan. That's why I didn't want that to get out to the public that the town administrator is circumventing.
Yeah, so I just want to be perfectly clear.
Good.
I'm not saying that. So nobody should leave this meeting thinking anybody here was saying that.
I
Sorry
apologize
for
if I
being a
misunderstood.
little unclear.
I apologize if I misunderstood you, Dan.
No,
I just
it
wanted
wa-
to be clear.
Yeah, we're good, Dan. You're off. I'll take you off the list. I got it
Yeah.
right here next to the Zoom meeting. No,
Okay.
but I think I do want to say, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here. I think that is valid criticism or concern, and I do plan on, rectifying that to the best of my ability. So I welcome the feedback. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Andy.
I just wanted to kind of echo what you said earlier and take a second to thank both Evan and Mary, because this presentation was so much clearer than it's been in years past. I big fan of everything on ClearGov, how transparent it all is, having project pictures. I mean, it was just fantastic. It was very easy to digest. Hats off, great job.
Thank you for taking my thunder, Andy. I appreciate that. I agree with Andy 100%. This was the ClearGov is really a great improvement. The way the budget was presented is going to be very, very easy for us to follow. And I think when the finance committee starts having their individual department meetings before they come in March with their formal presentations, I think we're going to have good information to sit down with the departments and get a clear understanding. So great job from you and Mary, Evan, and I can't thank you enough on behalf of the finance committee. Greg?
There is one kind of ClearGov question that I have.
Sure.
Under school department contracted services, there's a whole bunch of line items that just say contracted services.
Mhm.
And no information on what those services is. I don't know if there's something that I should be able to see, or if that's just something that still needs to be worked on.
Still something that just needs to be worked on.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Evan, I want to warn you, Greg is going to find every single problem.
Oh,
that
I know
you
Greg
create.
by this point.
Okay.
Greg and I are we're on the same page here. No, that's one thing I would like to leave just an impression with all of you is that ClearGov is it's a new tool for us, and it's a very big lift just to get it to where we're at today. So recognize that you're going to go into some areas of ClearGov in the budget book, and that'll say staffing number, and there's a question mark. We know there's a question mark. We're just marking that as something we need to keep chipping away at. So this has been, nights and weekends to get it to where it's at now. We're going to continue to build that document. One, out of selfishness, because next year that's the baseline we can build off of, but also, we want that to be the best budget book that we can possibly put together. And
I see an award in your future, Evan.
That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a permissions issue or something weird like that.
No, it's just, that's just how it is right now.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions from members of the finance committee or select board? Go ahead, Matthew.
I will forego the award for a functional budget every single year.
I will second that. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%.
I want it to be both.
Any other issues? Any other questions? Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Evan, great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Finance committee, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
All those in favor by roll call. Barry?
Aye.
Sue?
Aye.
Heather?
Hi.
Andy?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Roger?
aye, as long as
Greg?
it's Skip.
Aye.
Oh, Skip, sorry, Skip. I apologize. Greg?
Aye.
Angelina?
Hi.
Mark, aye. Finance committee, you're off and running to do your departmental meetings. You have the schedule. Sue was kind enough to send that out to us. So please start contacting them. And I guess, Sue, when's our first Saturday session?
We begin on March 5th at 8:30 a.m.
All right, so we'll be busy over the next couple of weeks meeting with everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. And again, Evan and Mary, great job. Really appreciate it. Good night, everyone.